In today's Oddcast, you are going to hear some awesome stories from some very awesome teachers.
Like a teacher who threw her body over the children to protect them from a tornado?
See what I mean?
Well, we always have an odd one in the crowd.
So it's kind of odd.
Decidedly odd.
Doesn't that strike you as a little bit odd?
No, that doesn't strike me as a little bit odd.
It's the Bob and Sheri Oddcast, with stuff we wouldn't, couldn't, or shouldn't do on the regular show. Now, here's the Oddcast.
Imagine being a daycare operator with other people's tiny infants and toddlers in your care, and then the tornado alarm goes off, and you have no time whatsoever to even think. You have to protect those children. So y'all, Miss Sherri began her career in high school and ended her career with babies. And if you heard her nomination letter when we read it on the show, one of her parents nominated her. Sherri had no idea. And part of that letter was, at this point, Sherri had begun running a daycare center out of her home, and a tornado came through, and Sherri put all those babies in a bathtub and then covered them with her own body to protect them from the tornado, which of course the state recognized by sending a case of hand sanitizer
They did.
to her house to thank her for her troubles. So
It's very nice of them.
So let's start. How did you find yourself in a high school classroom as a teacher?
Honestly, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I'm still not sure I know exactly where I'm supposed to be, but my dad was a teacher, my mom was a teacher, my grandmother was a teacher, my great-grandmother was a teacher. And so it just seemed like that was the route to take. And then I got my job, and I had no idea what I was doing because they did not teach you how to teach in college. They taught you the curriculum, but they didn't teach you all
Like
the
how
things.
to be in a
Right.
classroom.
But I learned that I loved teaching. I loved the kids. I loved the people I taught with. I loved teaching. It was the other stuff. It was the meetings. It was the lesson planning and the paper grading. And once I had kids, I didn't have time for all of it. I just couldn't. Or once I had a child, and then once I had a second child, I couldn't afford to keep teaching with 2 in daycare. And that's when I went into the daycare center. You know, I started a daycare in my home, and that's what my daughter had been in. I'd never even knew such a thing existed. I didn't know about home daycares. But I loved teaching high school, and I didn't just teach high school during the day. I also taught in the extended school day program, so I taught night school. And a funny story, I was listening to everybody. I'm like, what funny stories do I have? One year when I was teaching night school, these were kids who had dropped out of school. These were kids who just had a few credits left they had to get, but they didn't want their GED. They wanted their actual diploma. And so I had a student come in, and he was probably 22 or 23. And the principal came to me, and he was like, come here. And I was like, okay. And he's like, I have someone who wants to have a parent-teacher conference with you. And I said, oh, okay, you know, who's? And he said, oh, it's this 23-year-old student. And I said, oh, okay. He's like, it's his wife who wants to have the conference with you. And I was like, okay.
That's a first.
It was a first. And she came in, and she too was a teacher, and she was older than him. We're not going to go into all the fact that he had been her student at one point, but she was on him, and he was going to get it, and she was just like, I need to know this, and here's my number, and I want you to text me. And I'm thinking, this guy's an adult, and he's in the program, he's doing the work. But it was just bizarre to have a wife come in rather than a mother. Like, I was used to dealing with the parents. It was a totally different experience.
I would think that teaching in the extended program would be like a whole separate universe of challenges, because these are kids, in this case an adult, right? Mm-hmm. These are kids who, for whatever reason, either thought they couldn't do it, or life threw so many curveballs that they literally couldn't do it, and yet they wanted it so badly.
It's interesting because a lot of the kids that I ended up with, back then our county had 4 high schools, and then we had the Career Center which is where you could learn automotive and whatever, but that's where the extended school day program was. So all 4 of the high schools fed in if you wanted to do the extended school day program. And several of my students that I had had as freshmen who later dropped out, I ended up having in senior English in the extended school day program, which was really cool because
weren't you glad to see them come back?
It was great. And some of the kids, they were like, you told us we should do this, or you told us, that we could try this, and we just didn't do it. And now they were back, and we got them through. Every single one of them that came through ended up with their diploma at some point. So that was, it was really cool.
It seems like because you went from teenagers to babies and toddlers, but it seems like the extended school was where that real love of it ignited.
It really was. I had some of the best students at the high school. I had some of the worst administrators, and that can make or break a school. And we had some really rough times with some administrators that they didn't trust us to teach. They were micromanaging every little thing, and it just made teaching so hard because not only did we have to do our job, but we had to do these 900 pages of whatever that we had to turn in every week because they didn't trust us that we could be responsible to do what we were supposed to do. Whereas my administrator in the extended school day program was phenomenal, and he was the best, and he treated us like professionals. And he knew how important it was for these kids too, and he knew every kid's name. I mean, it didn't matter, my other administrators, we had a fairly big school, they didn't know who half the kids were. The extended school day program, I would have stayed in that forever. And of course, as all things do, it came to an end, and they decided they didn't need it anymore.
At a time when we need it
more than ever. Exactly.
So shifting gears from teenagers to toddlers, how big an adjustment was that?
It wasn't. It was a fun adjustment, and it wasn't at all difficult because I've always babysat. My sister was 10 years younger than me, so when she came along, I was already 10. So my parents would hire babysitters, but I was the one doing the work, because they said, "You're too young to take care of her by yourself." And it's been great. And so my daycare was a daycare for teachers' children. So we only kept teachers' kids or people who were willing to find a way to make it work in the summer. So we closed in the summer because we didn't want to work and the teachers didn't want to pay us, and it was perfect. And so it saved them money. It saved, they didn't want to put their kids in daycare all summer, but they're like, a lot of them were at a point where, well, if we're paying for the spot, we may as well send them, but yet they wanted to spend time with their kids. So it didn't start out immediately like that, but that's kind of what we were going towards. And so I've only kept teachers' kids now for 25 years. And it's been great. And because of that, I know teachers throughout the school system. I've met so many amazing people, and they're all so hardworking. And I told Sherri, I was like, any one of them could be here instead of me. I just happen to have a bunch of trees fall on my house.
So let's talk about that because and we can't even blame Chris. He was nowhere near you with the bus.
He was not. No.
He has a solid alibi for that afternoon. So talk about, you've got how many children did you have that day? Take us back to that day.
Had 5. I used to be licensed for 12, and I had a person who taught with me. She was my best friend, and she taught with me in the preschool, in the daycare also, until she was like, okay, I'm done. By this time, she was quite a bit older than me, and so she had already done her 30 years of teaching, and then she worked a few years doing other stuff, and then she came to work for me for like 13. So when she left, and my mom also retired, my mom also worked with me, then I just went down in numbers because I didn't know if I could find someone responsible or dependable. So I had 5, and so it was a full house for me because they were babies. I had Abigail was the youngest. I think she was 4 months old. And then my oldest was 1.5, maybe. So they were all babies. Yeah, they were all 5 itty bitties, and it was nap time. And so I have a playroom, and the big kids, which were the 3 1-year-olds, were in the playroom, and then the 2 babies were in the house with me. and my husband was home because it was raining. He does lawn care, so he wouldn't have been home otherwise. And he cannot sit in a quiet house, so he had the TV on, and he had the news on, thankfully.
Thank God, yeah.
Because everybody, they're like, you didn't hear my phone didn't go off. Apparently phones are supposed to go off, and I get warnings for everything else, but I didn't get anything on the day of the tornado. And it said, this tornado is coming down 51. It's going to hit Providence High School in 3 minutes. And I can walk from my house to Providence.
Like it's right there.
It's right there. And my husband was standing out on the back deck, and he's like, it looks really bad out here. And I just started screaming. I'm like, grab a baby, because they were all asleep. The two were in the house with me, but they were in a sunroom, which was all glass. And my son was home because he was doing a virtual high school situation. It was pre-COVID, but he was doing virtual. And so I yelled for him, and I grabbed the babies, and I threw one in Zach's arms, and I'm like, hold this. I mean, it was a baby. I'm like, hold this. And I'm grabbing another one, and my husband went out to the playroom and grabbed a couple, and we were just all, I didn't know what to do because they're babies, and I wanted to just throw them in the bathroom and go grab another one because I knew my husband couldn't carry all three of them. But they're screaming. They've just been pulled out of their beds. Yeah. They're crying, and then I'm like, it doesn't matter. They can cry. I have to go get the others, and then I'm thinking, what if one falls in a toilet? Like, you just don't know. They're babies. Are they gonna? And it was just so. My husband came back. We got all 5 of them, and he came back with the 5th one. And he was wet, and Vivian was wet. And I said, what? And he's like, there's a tree down. And I said, oh, where? And he's like, no, there is a tree in the room, like
where the babies were.
We have pictures of the cribs. I mean, it's just, so yeah, I mean, if he had not been home that day, it would not have gone as smoothly. Like, thank God he was there, because there was no way to get 5 that quickly to safety with one person when you have kids screaming and you have, you're pulling them out of beds, and it was a nightmare. And
it all happened, the storm that came through happened, it was so violent and so fast. Mm-hmm. Like, no one really even had a chance to, it wasn't like the Wizard of Oz where in the distance there's the funnel cloud.
Right, no, it was there.
No, it was just boom. And so 3 trees came down.
We had 3 trees come down on our house or on my husband's shed, and then we had a 4th that caught a tree, and it split all the way down, but it saved the sunroom where the 2 babies had been, but they were by then in the hall and in the bathroom. It was propping it up, so it only took out a corner of the sunroom instead of the whole thing, because they were all big oaks. They would have taken the whole thing down.
So can you imagine, you're teaching, you're at work, and you get this warning that there's a tornado, and you hear where it's headed, and that's where your baby is, right? And then there it's on, because Sherri's house and neighborhood, it was all over the news. It was all over Facebook, because it was such a near miss of a tragedy, like a devastating tragedy. But imagine, like, you're a parent, and you're going, oh, the tornado is at my daycare. Is what that was like.
It is, and so everybody was texting me, and I had such an adrenaline rush, and I was shaking. It was over. Everybody was fine, and they're like, is everything okay? Oh, we were in the hallway, but we're fine. And so one of my moms had texted, and all I wrote, I texted back, and I just put treehouse, and it just said treehouse, and so. All the other parents had gotten actual messages from me and had come and picked up their kids. And baby, Abigail, was still there. And I thought, I can't believe that Mike and Lauren haven't come to get Abigail yet. And I looked back and I was like, I texted her and I said, I don't think I explained what happened. I said, I have trees on the house. And she said, oh, I just thought maybe you were outside playing in the treehouse. Yeah. And I was like, no.
Reading the magic treehouse, anything but.
But it was crazy because the parents couldn't even get into my house. There were so many trees down. Like, they had to literally pick their way over and through trees and come in, like, through the back door in order to get to the kids for me to even hand them over. I mean, it was just.
See what we expect from teachers? You don't even have to be in the classroom. We're like, can you save my child? Thanks. I'll get there when I can.
Yeah. No, they were these parents. I've not had a bad parent. All of my families have been phenomenal. Again, because they're all teachers, and they've all been so good, and they're so respectful. And I'm one of those people who feels really guilty if I ever have to take time off for anything. If I have a dog, could you pick up 30 minutes early because, the dog has to go to the vet or something? And they're all like, of course, yeah, no problem. But I always feel guilty for asking them. And they have all been phenomenal from the get-go. And after the tornado, it was the same thing. They all were like, oh, can people donate toys? Because we had to move out of our house. It had to be rebuilt and everything. And I was supposed to open back up, and I did for about 12 days, and then, of course, COVID. So, they were getting their friends to donate toys and beds and whatever, because everything in that room was pretty much gone. Yeah.
I remember the first time I asked you, I was like, God, you're with babies and toddlers. Like, every day was teething and diapers and fussy and runny nose and pink eye and like all this stuff, right? And I said, how do you do it? And Sherri said, well, I used to teach high school. Oh.
Babies are nothing.
This is like a little vacation. I get it. Yeah, okay.
It is. Yeah, so, but now I'm going to stop doing that and go sub back in the high school. So that should be fun too.
So if you had to think of what is the number one thing that toddlers and high school like seniors have in common?
Oh, they all have attitude. They all have attitude. I mean, my babies are so joyful, and I have little twins this year that are absolutely the most joyful girls I've ever met in my life. Like they're so passionate about, and they're so much fun. But they all can have attitude too, and that's absolutely
starts early.
Oh yeah, they'll just no, I'm not going to do it, or I don't like you. How can you not like me? Yeah. So
one of the things that has amazed me about teachers my whole life, so it was one of the parents whose baby was in the tornado that nominated Sherri, and we were blown away by the nomination. And Sherri found out she won, and she was like, oh yeah, the tornado, I think I forgot about that.
It's like I blocked it out, because when Sherri read it and she was going into, and there was this tornado, and Sherri and her husband and her son saved our children, I was like that never would have even dawned on me to put into a nomination. I think a lot of it honestly is PTSD. It's something I try not to think about, and I still get a little panicky with big storms.
Yeah.
And then just thinking about it, like I get all anxious.
But that's how you know you're a teacher, when you're like, oh yeah, that's right. A tornado destroyed the house while I was taking care of these children. Forgot. Yeah. It's just another day at work.
Another day at work. I mean, it's kind of like life. It's the high school. A lot of times it seemed like a tornado was blowing through. So what's the difference?
Well, I can't wait to see what happens when you get back in the high school classroom.
Yeah, me too.
And the amazing keeps coming. We were blown away by our next winner's story. Jennifer works in the office and as a substitute teacher. Jennifer's about to tell you a story that proves what we mean when we say your kids' teachers are ready to lay down their lives. Do y'all know Miss Jen's last name? It's the greatest last name in show business. This is a rockin' sock.
It is. Did Bob take on my last name?
Is Rockin' Sock not the greatest last name? Like, would you mess with a teacher named Miss Rockin' Sock?
Probably why I'm good in the office.
So tell us about you and how you got here.
Oh my goodness. So, I was a graphic designer for like 19 years, and I had multiple people underneath me, and I did adjunct at BSU, at our school, at our college. And I was so adamant that I was not going to be a teacher because my dad was an EBT teacher. And I was like, nope, he's done it 35 years at this really hard school. And I'm like, I'm not having it. Like, not. And then I ended up secretary at a school. And then I ended up lead secretary at a school. And I'm thinking, oh, he got his way. Like, how did this happen? And I already had a 4-year degree, so then I ended up being very much subbing a lot. Like, I average about 23 hours a week subbing in the classroom because we didn't have subs. So, who else do you have in there? And right in front of me, I have the C wing, it's the sped wing, it's my kids. Like, I was so into them. So, the harder they were, the more I'm like, bring it on. Like, I got you. So,
Spoken like a rock and sock.
Yeah, so this is kind of that it is my world. It was definitely my calling. It took me a little while to get there.
You fought it?
I got there. I did fight it. My dad laughs at me every day. He's like, I told you, EBD, girl, come on, EBD. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. Yeah, that's
and now
where
you're
I'm
doing
at.
that.
That's where I'm at.
So
Yep.
your very first day as a substitute teacher, like, I mean, what did you do? Did you know what to do?
I did because, I babysat grown people that had degrees, like graphic designers, like they could take care of themselves, And I walked into an ASD room and I'm like, oh boy, here we go, and they are so, this is their world. These are the people, like they gotta know you. And I just was lucky enough that they had saw me enough at the front end, at the office multiple times, and I would greet them. I'd go out. I made sure I was always there for them. I was like, I'm here. Like, I see you. And that's a big thing at our school is just telling the kids, I see you. So, yeah, they just became my world, and I just loved it.
How long before you admitted to yourself that this was where you were supposed to be?
Oh, gosh, I still fight it. I still want to tell my dad, you're wrong. You're so wrong. But you know what? I'm not. And, the person that, put me up for this, I'm like, I'm not a teacher. Why'd you put me in this? Like, and I was like, kind of like, oh, what's going to happen here? Thank you. But I am game for anything. I think the biggest joke is that I think the only thing I haven't done is yet drive the bus. Drive the bus. So I am working on
good
that.
things. Yeah.
I am working on that. I do hear that's an extremely hard job. I don't know. Right. Yeah. But I do all the time say, I'll fill a bus. They can come to my house. I will take them home.
When you say, why you shouldn't have nominated me, I'm not a teacher. I mean, one of the really cool things that has been just so unbelievable for us is seeing that, like, we kind of have the whole holistic school experience in this room.
I don't know that we expected to get this wide of a variety of things. Because when you say teachers, you have in your mind, you have a certain thing, but there's way more to it.
Yeah.
There's way more to it. It
takes a community.
Yeah,
it takes a community.
It does.
Yep. It's full circle. Like, I mean, you can say that, the secretaries, they've got this. Like, they are, like, in charge of the school, they got this. But you know what? If you don't have these people around you, these amazing people around you, you can't function. Yeah. So, I mean, it is a round circle. Like, you start here, you got to fill it. It takes community.
Well, and especially if you're lucky enough for your kids to go to a K-8 or a K-12 school, every person in that school, from the custodian, right, to the bus drivers, the teachers' assistants, the parent volunteers, everyone in the office, that is the community that your children are going to grow up in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I custodian at night. So I'd get done with my whole, 8-hour day, and it was an 8-hour day. I went at 6:15. Wasn't supposed to be there till 7:30, but you got to be there. Like, we had kids dropped off. Like, parents would drop them off. They didn't care. Like, drop them off, boom, they're in front of your school. Well, I'm like, come on in. You sit in my office. When the bell rings, you can go to class. But, right now, just sit, we'll have breakfast, we'll have all the things. And, they just dropped him off. So it's like you felt like you just had to be there for him. But then, when you got through the full circle, it's just like, okay, now their classrooms need to be cleaned. Like, the kindergarten teacher will say it. They lick everything. Like, my school is 4th and 5th grade, and they still, like, we say we live in a fishbowl. We're all glass. And literally the kids are like, tongue out the mouth and just licking the glass. So I'm like, oh my gosh. And we got amazing custodians and they do crazy good things. So I'm like, you gotta help them out at the end of the day.
But the fact that you would come in more than an hour early so that no little kid was standing outside in the dark or the cold, and then instead of going home and hitting it like we would, it's cocktail time, you're cleaning the school, and do you all still use that barf powder?
You know what? No.
I forgot about
No, we've got amazing machines. We call it the puke machine. Or I do have a teaching degree. So I'm a technology teacher, and I let it go. And I had no intentions of using it. But I'm like, okay, it's there, whatever. But wherever I did my student teaching, we had a blood machine. So we had lots of fights. I mean, where we live, it's pretty poor. It's pretty hardcore. Like, we've got a lot of different types of people that just need to function, and they just couldn't. And it was called the blood machine. And I mean, it was right next to my technology room. And at first I thought, oh my God, are these children bleeding because of me? Like, they're on these, like, machines, and is that why they're calling it the blood machine? No, it was, like, because it was full-on fights.
So is the blood machine commercial, kind of available to just asking? Like,
it does have its little own place.
Hypothetically, let's say something happens and you've got
you
a lot of blood.
You don't have to cut the carpet up out of the floor.
You do not. You do not. It was an amazing machine. We used it quite often. So we made it through it.
So it sounds like for you, teaching is like all kinds of hands-on.
All kinds of hands-on. They're my best kids. Like, we're in the office. I mean, Miss Michelle told me, you're going to know your who's who kids. And I'm thinking, what is she talking about? Who's who? Like, who's going to be on the most wanted? Who's going to be on the, and I'm like, at first I'm like joking around. I'm thinking like, this is super funny. It's not funny at all. It's exactly it. Yeah. Like, you do know where these kids are going to fall. And then, you know what? The harder they were, the more I loved them. And like, we had some kids that were in our office every day. And the joke was, they made a sign for their chair. So they put their name on it, and they gave it to us. And every day when lunch came, we put their name on the chair they wanted to sit on. Because, we knew they were going to be there. They weren't horrible by no means, but they were like, hey, can we claim a chair? Absolutely. Which one would you like?
So I bet that by doing that, just by meeting those kids right where they were, I bet a couple of them turned around and showed you that their behavior was because no one was looking.
Oh my God,
no one was seeing them.
So sweet. I had one kid, I was like, he's so sweet, and he did the chair thing, and he was just the thing. And I was in Walmart, and he is like, Mom, Miss Jen, and she's just like giving me the look, like, why do you know my child? Why are you even that close to my child? Like, why does he know your name? I'm like, hey, how you doing, buddy? And he's just like, Mom, this is Miss Jen. And she's like, okay, well, who's Miss Jen? She's the secretary. I spend a lot of time with her. And I'm like, I got you, buddy. I do spend a lot of time with you, but I very much appreciate you. And he was just so excited that the fact that I knew his name, that it didn't chalk him up to be this horrible child. I mean, yes, he was in the office all the time, but it was because he talked a lot. He was Lamar. He talked a lot.
He had a lot to say.
He did have a lot to say. And you know what? He would come in and Miss Michelle would pop up the website for, in San Diego. And she would show him all the live spots of all the animals, and this kid was totally in. Like, he was never, ever in his wildest dreams ever going to be able to meet or see that. But just that special moment where someone just said, hey, you know what? I see you. I got you. Like, here it is. Like, come on behind my desk. I have no problem. Sit on my bouncy ball, because that's what we sit on. Live my dream. And they would just sit there, and just a simple fact that they thought, okay, they got me. Like, I am safe here. I'm heard. I am seen. I am safe.
I'm a little person.
Yes.
I'm not a problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's where it really hit. I'm like, yeah, Dad, you really had this. Like, yeah, this was me.
And was your dad the kind of dad that just said, that's my girl, or did he say, I told you so?
Oh, my God. So, he had a student that was unbelievably, like, he could draw like no other, and it was super dark, and you knew that his life was super hard. And my dad made a point of, like, he did, like, the pizza thing. So if you brought in all your homework, he got a piece of pizza. Well, once you failed that pizza, he brought you to eat pizza. And so it always ended up to be, so it was so they had like a camper boat, like all this stuff. So he would bring them to that, and he'd bring them through that, and they'd go for pizza. And he'd feed them like hot dogs and all this stuff. Like, these kids ate like you wouldn't believe. Like, this one kid was like, his favorite thing was macaroni and cheese with syrup on it. Like, to me, I'm like, no. But this was like his number one thing, and like, it might have been the only meal he got during that day. So he just made a good, and his like file cabinets were not files by no means. It was M&Ms, chips, whatever these kids wanted, pop, whatever. So his world was totally about just trying to help these children just function. And so this one kid, it was super dark, and I had like done boards for my dad. Like, I would go every time during the summer and set up all his boards, and I'd be just living the best life. Like, I loved it. I wasn't going to give him that benefit, but I loved it. And I met all these kids. Well, this kid ended up, causing a person to be a quadriplegic, killed his girlfriend's family. Like, a lot of just really dark stuff. And you still got to love him. Like, you knew that it was a rough life.
And yet your dad
never did. And this kid, I mean, he's in prison for life, but he still has my dad's phone number. He still calls him. So it's like, it just takes that certain person. I mean, you hit that, and I'll tell like the people that I'm working with, I'm like, you realize, like, we did have a school shooting within 30 miles. 9 people passed away. So we know what that is, and we have 2 teachers in our school that lived it. So it very much is like hard in their core. And the one gym teacher, I have told all the people that have worked with me, I'm like, like this last year, it was like a 20 and a 22-year-old. So I'm like, you realize that we're like the first ones. Like, you've got to be well aware that we're here for these babies. And they're 4th and 5th graders, but that's what we're here for. Yeah. So, we really got that. And then our gym teacher, he was actually the main target of this one. And his students, one of his students that was in the hallway, he actually had heard it all and got there and knew that he was that one. And he's like, you gotta shut it down. You like gotta lock these doors. Like, this kid is coming. And he did. And he is like, he's an amazing teacher. And he still just powers through it for these babies. And yeah, so you see him every year at this time, and you're just like, how could you be any less than a best human for these babies?
And how, I can't even imagine as a parent to know that there was, because no one loves your kids like you do, but to know that there's this other person who has just decided, I'm going to ride alongside.
Right?
And
I mean,
I'm never going to give up.
And this kid's grandparent was a cop, and he shot him, and he was also, and my husband's law enforcement, so I get all that. But we have seen a lot. But I just look at the people here, and I'm like, oh my God, you are like the people that can get these kids through this.
But you are the people.
Yeah, it's true.
You are the people, and isn't it kind of crazy because you would think like, well, how are we going to just randomly manage to have the people? But there's nothing random ever. There's no randomness.
No, you're going to put yourself out there, and I've said every day, I'm like, I will be that person. Like, I will take on, like, we did just finally get the button, that actually locks down your school. So, I mean, our school is only 6 years old, and I've only been doing this for 6 years. Like, I was a graphic designer all this. I had no idea what all this nonsense was going on. So I come in, and like this last year, we finally got that buzzer where you hit the button and it actually locks you down. Whereas before, we had this, it looked like a triangle, and you had to reach up and you had to stick it over the shock of your school. I was the only person that was tall enough to do it. That one shock up across that protected our whole school.
To hold the glass door shut.
Yeah.
And if you had not decided to leave graphic design,
Right?
poor Michelle's like, I don't have a chair.
I have no chair. I can't reach. I'm too short.
And I mean, we're the first, like, you walk up and it's the fishbowl. So, I mean, to have time to do it was not really, you didn't have time. You had no time.
You were going to send up the announcement
Yeah.
to lock down the school and give everybody else a chance.
Correct.
The idea that most of your community has no idea that y'all are the thin turquoise bestie line.
We won't share what our shirts is. We do.
I can't do the math in my head, but I'm pretty sure Kristen has somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 maybe, or something like that, other children. And that's that's the mind-blowing thing. I mean, Lamar, I'll speak for Lamar. Lamar is a very good person. And God knows I try.
Even though he talks a lot.
God knows I try, but like, that's just not even worthy. Like,
No.
y'all are the front lines of humanity, and we're over here going, I know a knock-knock joke.
I did that. Right?
There's no doubt about it.
No.
I was the first one that was going down.
Yep.
If something bad happened.
And we knew that. I still know that.
And you still wake up every day and choose that.
Yep.
And you go to
Yep.
work. Yeah.
Yep.
I don't think anybody here today will, like, we could all live to be 100 and none of us will forget. It's really humbling. And I could say a lot about the school system where my children went, but my God, give a girl a chair and a ladder, maybe even. The badass besties of Bemidji. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Oddcast. And thanks to our teachers in today's show, Sherri and Jennifer. I will say, and Lamar, I mean, tell me if you agree, that the time we spent with those teachers was like life-changing for me. I mean, I can't stop thinking about it. These are the greatest
100%.
people. Yeah.
To sit in that room with that group of people that have accomplished and are still accomplishing all that they're doing, please. It's awesome. It really is.
It was something else. So thank you for listening to this episode of the Oddcast. Our website is BOBANDSHERI.com. Hey, if you have school-age kids, give that teacher an extra little bit of love and a slap on the back for what they do. And if your kids are finished with school, take a moment and be so grateful that we have people like this who sign up for that most important job. We'll see you on the next Oddcast.